Hello, welcome back to your channel about peace studies and conflict resolution. Today we're going to talk about street addiction and mindfulness. And I have here a friend of mine, which I like you very much.
Thank
and
you.
I'm very happy to have you here with me today. Dessa, she's a specialist Ph.D. researcher and professor at the University of Syracuse in the United States, and she researches about public health and addiction. And my first question to you is what addiction is all about and how this addiction applies to street. What is this all about?
Sure. So addiction involves biological, neuroscience components, as well as psychological and social factors. And it's really about something that becomes a central focus and drives somebody's life. So in the aspect of when we look at street addiction, what we're talking about are people who are involved in, for example, gang activity or street crime, and that it really itself becomes its own behavioral addiction. So a little bit like we think about gambling, in that the person becomes completely preoccupied with that behavior, with engaging in certain activities, and new research has shown that it's actually driven by processes in the brain because it becomes rewarding. People continue to do it because on some level there is something neurologically that they get out of it, as well as social reinforcement and psychological benefits.
And could you explain what is mindfulness?
So mindfulness is can be a trait or a state of mind, but it's really a context in terms of being fully aware of what you're thinking, how you're acting, and what motivates not only your thoughts but your behaviors and how those come together. And how that relates to addiction is that in the case of, for example, street addiction, without being aware of why you're involved in, or kind of going back to some of the activity with a gang or in the street life, without really understanding what's driving that behavior, you don't have an opportunity to make a choice and maybe choose a different path or interrupt that cycle. So mindfulness helps you to be aware of physically where are you feeling sort of the draw, the desire, the attraction, the anger, the aggression, the enjoyment about being involved in that, and then being aware of what's driving those behaviors. So mindfulness can be helpful in terms of interrupting that cycle, being aware of patterns of thought and behavior that become habitual, and maybe choosing a different path.
And I always like to have a real example. So what is a street addiction in real life? What do they do? What kind of behavior they are addicted to?
So the street addiction theory was developed, we did the research on it, but it came from people who have had a long time involvement in gang activity. And what they describe is the excitement, the adrenaline, the literal draw of what they call dopamine that gets released in the brain from being in often near-death experiences, interactions that involve aggression, and that activates certain parts of the brain where you're very focused on what you're doing. You have a mission, you're very targeted at it, and that in itself is rewarding. Again, similar to if we think of gambling, where people are very focused on a particular activity, there's anticipation, there's either reward or loss, and depending on the outcome from that, they will have, again, another neurological reaction for that. So with street addiction, it could be, if you're, for example, if you're involved in drug trade, drug trafficking, there's some thrill and excitement about the potential of having it be successful or trying to evade the law. The risks that are involved and overcoming those risks. If it goes well, it's a success. And so those things, just like in any other context, can be rewarding for an individual.
And I would like to know, have you ever applied mindfulness to street addiction or to gang members, and what was your experience?
Yeah, yes, and so we've used it with individuals, and then beyond myself too, there's been a lot of work involving mindfulness in prisons and with individuals who have been repeatedly involved in the justice system, where they have an opportunity to be quiet for an extended period of time and really reflect on their life circumstances, their life experiences, and how the stressors often that they've had sometimes growing up and throughout life have fed into being involved in a high intensity, high stress activities like you might have in a gang, and having an opportunity to decompress and de-stress and sort of deal with some of the neurological, psychological, and social factors that contribute to that and interrupt that gives them an opportunity to be forgiving to themselves, to sometimes be forgiving with others, and to be able to cultivate new ways, new patterns of thinking and reacting or responding, rather than choosing the same path that has been troublesome for them in the past, and choosing a new way to respond and react to situations and to people and to stress in other ways. And one of the things that's very, very important is, although there can sometimes be often aggression or whatever that comes about through gang conflict or some of the criminal behavior and crime in the streets, the people involved in those aspects of life have often faced tremendous stressors and difficult challenges in the past and not had an opportunity to really work through those in a healthy way. And so mindfulness-based practices can provide them with the tools to be self-directed, to take control of their response to those factors, and again to choose a response rather than just a reaction, and to do some healing for themselves and some self-forgiveness and sometimes some forgiveness for other folks who've crossed their path.
And in your experience, how long do you think it takes for someone to feel the effects of mindfulness when they come from such a difficult background?
So that again depends on how much reinforcement they have, how much opportunity they have to practice. But for example, we've worked with military veterans who've experienced some very, very difficult, you might say somewhat similar combat experience to what people face in the streets. And we've found that they, in a period of 4 weeks, with practicing as little as once a week for 90 minutes or 2 hours, have had physiological, neurological improvements and changes in their response, as well as reporting having less depression, less anxiety, reduction in traumatic stress experiences and things like that. So not only what they're reporting, but also what the medical biomarkers that we're tracking are showing that in 4 weeks you can see a significant improvement.
For how long have you practiced mindfulness, and what does someone need to be able to teach it?
So I've practiced sitting meditation, which is one part of mindfulness, for probably 10, 11 years or so. But I've had other practices, so running and yoga and things like that, for close to 40 years. And so you don't have to, sitting still isn't for everyone. Things like martial arts can also be a mind-body experience where there's discipline, there's an awareness of your body, what you're thinking, how you're acting, how you're going to react, and those things all come into play. But one of the key important things in order to teach it is to have your own practice. Just like with martial arts and things like that, without having your own practice, without really knowing what the benefits, what the risks, what it's all about, you really can't teach it. But having said that, there are a lot of free tools and utilities for practice that are available online and through apps and things like that. And so if it's not in your community, not in your neighborhood, you can hopefully find ways to try it and cultivate that on your own as well.
To finish,
yes,
what would you say to someone that resists to trying to do meditation or mindfulness? Because sometimes they have this like stereotyping, like, I'll be sitting down,
Yeah.
and sitting comfortable, like da 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 da. Because you do when you're running as well, so kind of. If you
Yes.
could talk a little bit about that.
So I would say to find, the key is to find what works for you. So, and it's a balance between giving up too easily and too quickly. I myself couldn't have done it when I was in my early mid-20s probably, even though I ran. Running, movement meditation was helpful for me, but sitting still, I wouldn't have probably bought into it. So find what works for you, and then also don't be afraid of the stillness, because the silence and the stillness can be really frightening, challenging, and stressful sometimes for people. as well as the idea of being silent and quiet for that extended period of time can be difficult. So find what works for you, but don't be afraid to let yourself get calm, get quiet, be still, and embrace what that feels like. And look at whatever comes up for you and choose to observe it, maybe rather than react to it.
I would like to thank you very much.
Sure.
And say that you inspire me to start meditation, and that I actually started here in Thailand. I have an app and I should practice more. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.